campaign committee chair, Nan Stark, but she says hello. She's actually in California. Okay, so first up, I'll just read out the order one more time. We've got Representative Suzanne Bonamici, Darcy Long, Kaliko Castille, Mark Gamba, Raz Mason, George Carrillo, and Hoa Nguyen's video at the end to close us out. Okay, Representative Bonamici, are you ready to go?
I am ready to go.
Okay,
are you ready?
I'm ready. The timer will appear in one of the small windows, but it'll also, you'll hear the chime and the bell. Hopefully it's not too obnoxious, but the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much to the Multnomah County Democrats. I'm really grateful to be with you tonight. Thank you for having me first. I am on the East Coast and I have a bill on the floor tomorrow morning, so I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. So I am honored to be the current representative for the 1st Congressional District, which includes some of Multnomah County, but just a sliver in Northwest, all of Washington County, Clatsop, Columbia, Yamhill County. So the new district that I'm running for is more of Multnomah County, and it's also picking up Tillamook County. Only part of Washington County and Yamhill County will be in the new district. So I will be representing, if I'm honored with re-election, more of Multnomah County, downtown, West Hills, Multnomah Village, which I represented for a few months until the new lines went into effect after 2012, and some of Southeast Portland up to Cesar Chavez, with the 84 being the northern boundary and Powell, the southern boundary. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know a lot of new constituents, a lot of new voters. I'll tell you just a little bit about my background. I spent some time in Eugene. I worked my way through community college once I found my passion, and I did that working at legal aid. Then I went to University of Oregon and the University of Oregon Law School. So 7 years I did that on my own with a combination of grants, loans, and work study. Then I was a consumer protection lawyer at the Federal Trade Commission in Washington, D.C. And then when I got back to Oregon, was raising my family, I became a very involved advocate for public education. I firmly believe in public education as a way to create opportunity for all. So I was a parent volunteer. I advocated for school funding in Salem and then served in the state House and Senate. A little more than 10 years ago, was elected in a special election. And so now I'm running for the new district that, of course, our legislature drew. I'm a leader on the Education and Labor Committee. I also serve on a senior member on the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. And I also serve on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. So the House, as you know, you're all involved, Democrats, you know, the House is passed so many great pieces of legislation and sent them over to the Senate. As I say, they're pending in the Senate, but we are not giving up the fight. And now with the attack on the rights of people to make their own healthcare decisions, we need the Senate to end the filibuster. And I know that we have a lot of momentum in that regard. I hope the senators address that. You know, we've passed voting rights, Build Back Better legislation, the Women's Health Protection Act, lots of things that are pending over there. So I mentioned I serve on the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. I helped draft a comprehensive science-based climate action plan. I chair in Education and Labor the Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Human Services. Tomorrow morning, we're considering my bipartisan bill to increase funding for and expand the opportunities for our community action agencies, which are anti-poverty agencies, to help more people in our communities. Hoping to get that over the finish line in the Senate as well. I've been working on childcare, which is so important for the health of our children and families. And I was excited about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, although I preferred the original version that Congressman DeFazio led. It's great that we were able to get this done. I've been working on the workforce pieces to make sure that we're expanding all those good jobs that will be coming when we build our infrastructure, install charging stations, transition to clean energy economy. We need to make those good jobs available, particularly to people who have been left behind, our women, people of color. So I'm excited about that. I'm a big supporter of Oregon tradeswomen. I'm doing an event with them on Saturday. So midterms, we know how important this election is.
Thank you, Representative Bonamici, for
Am I
your,
out of time already?
intro. You know,
Oh,
honestly, I didn't realize somebody must have removed my timer. I went through all of this, like, got to get it set up, and it was all good, and now it's not in our
okay.
meeting, and I
All
can't.
right. Well, you all know how important the midterms are. So
But
I'm ready for your questions.
okay, Britton, do we have some questions?
We don't have any questions, but I would love to hear you talk about Roe more, and specifically what you think we can do, not just in the short term, but in the long term to help. Because obviously, subject is top of mind for all of us.
Perfect. So we have 12 minutes total for you to speak. No questions right now. Go with it.
Okay. Yeah, I tell you, I share your concern, as do millions of people across the country. I was in high school before Roe versus Wade, and I know that we're not going back. For the people in this country, for the rights of people to have that liberty to make their own reproductive health care decisions, I have to say that this is creating a huge concern. We passed, as I mentioned, the Women's Health Protection Act to put Roe versus Wade into law in the House. We sent that over to the Senate. I sat in the gallery yesterday. We watched that go down in the Senate, but we are not giving up this fight. Because this is about the freedom, the liberty of people to make their own healthcare decisions. And I'm concerned, as I know you are too, as Democrats, because it's a draft opinion, and the right to abortion exists right now under Roe versus Wade is still law. But you know that this draft opinion that was leaked, the decision is based on, and Roe versus Wade is based on privacy. And if this opinion as drafted goes into effect, everything else is based on the 14th Amendment and privacy, LGBTQ rights to contraception, our rights to privacy and liberty will be under attack. So we are not giving up the fight. I hope that this really inspires people to get out and vote. In Oregon, where we have no restrictions, and by the way, very low rates of abortion, because we offer comprehensive sex education and access to contraception. It makes sense, but we respect people to make their own decisions. I know Planned Parenthood is building a clinic over in Eastern Oregon to help, for example, people in Idaho. And as we see states with the trigger laws or other states passing these restrictions, Oregon can be and will be a welcoming state for those people. I think of the wealthy women have always been able to find abortions, even before Roe versus Wade. This is going to disproportionately affect scared young people and people of color. And I'm going to do everything I can. And of course, with the Supreme Court, I'm not in the Senate, but we've got to end the filibuster and see if we can get the Every Women's Health Act passed over there as well to codify that. So this election is going to be key to doing that. But we, all eyes are on what's going to happen with this whatever opinion comes out. But I'm in for the fight and not going back. There's too much at stake, and I'm proud to be from Oregon, where we respect people's liberties. But I'm really worried about the other states, and will do all I can to help them, but also to help get Democrats elected, pro-choice Democrats elected, and get rid of these extremist anti-choice Republicans.
You have some questions. I'll let Britton go to this question, but to share your enthusiasm for living in the comfort of living in Oregon, of knowing that I always feel like Oregon just has this sense of security for me that I do. I also worry about other states like Texas, where I'm from originally. Yeah. So, but I don't want to interrupt. Britton, you want to go to?
I'm very worried about other states. Yeah. I see two hands up. I see Martin and Bill. Hi, Bill.
Yeah, I know Martin has a question. It looks like about direct contracting entities, which I don't know about. He's asking if they can be stopped.
Can I speak, please? Suzanne, you and I met at the Washington County Forum many years ago.
Well, nice to see you.
Times at the forum, and I then moved out of your district, and now I'm delighted to have been redistricted back into your.
I'm honored.
I am just absolutely delighted. Suzanne, you may remember I'm a family physician, retired now from practice, but I'm also a member of the faculty of the School of Public Health at UW and very much into public health issues and Medicare, Medicaid issues. Direct contracting entities are something that are being put in place by CMS in this administration. It was started in the Trump administration. It's being continued in this administration, and it amounts to putting for-profit entities as the payment conduits between Medicare and practices. And right now, Medicare, CMS operates Medicare at a 2% overhead. These direct contracting entities are allowed to withhold 30% for their management costs. Can we please, I mean, do you know something about this? And will you get your colleagues to join you in doing something about it?
Well, thank you, Martin, for raising that issue. And would be extremely concerned if, in fact, Medicare is going from 2% overhead to 30% overhead and letting that happen. I do know that Oregon has high rates of people who are enrolled in Medicare Advantage. And there are equity issues with that as well. But I will look into the issue. I'm surprised that the Biden administration would continue that. I'll look into it. And Ellie Zuckerman is with me from my campaign team. We'll follow up with you and I'll see if anybody's taken a look at that, because I mean, I support Medicare for all. I mean, that's the system that we need, because our healthcare system right now is too complicated, too expensive, and there are too many gaps.
Yep.
So that's where I am. So we'll follow up.
We've always been in agreement about these things.
Thank you. Good to see you. Hi, Bill. Nice to see you. How are you?
Oh, there. I was
muted.
That's how I was. Regarding the abortion issue, do you think it reasonable nationally and to some extent in Oregon, but where congressmen are running for office, to make the abortion issue a litmus tissue, a litmus check?
You mean for people running for office?
Yes, no, push it forward in the campaign to get candidates to state where they are on the abortion issue.
I absolutely think candidates should state where they are on the abortion issue. Absolutely. I mean, it's a fundamental right. It's been enshrined in the Constitution for 50 years at least, and people should say where they stand. And I stand for letting people make their own reproductive health care decisions and not having, government interfere. And so, yes, absolutely, people should state where they stand. I'll tell you who didn't state where they stand was now Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Coney Barrett, when they were asked whether they respected precedent. They did not honestly state where they stand on that issue, but candidates should, absolutely. And if anybody has any questions about where I stand, I am very much pro-choice and very much opposed to putting restrictions. This is an issue that is very personal and needs to be made by the person and their medical provider if that is who they're consulting with, and not for government.
Do you think this issue can help Democrats hold the Congress?
I hope so. I truly hope so. And I'll tell you something I don't want to hear, and that is Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, because that's what we are facing if the Democrats do not keep the majority, and we have a slim majority right now. Another thing I don't want to hear is Speaker Kevin McCarthy, and we're at risk of that as well. And I can assure you that they do not respect people's individual rights to make their own medical decisions. They're going to force people. They said the government can't make people wear a mask and during a global pandemic, but they can force somebody to bear a child. It's unbelievable. So elections matter. We are going to be participating with a coordinated campaign. I was in the state legislature as well. And typically what we do is we align with all the Democrats. And so we'll be working with the local, state, and federal Democratic races and coordinate that so that we are not duplicating efforts and reaching as many voters as we can.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good to see you, Bill.
Okay, we're at 13 minutes. Britton and I were chatting because we have such a short video and we're still missing a candidate. We're going to give everybody a little bit of extra time. Representative Bonamici, though, if you would maybe close us out with your minute, 2 minute, I don't know, stump speech or why we should vote
Well,
Democrat.
Thank you so much to Multnomah Democrats for all you do. It has been truly an honor to represent the 1st Congressional District over the last decade. There have been many challenges, but also many opportunities. I have served in the minority for several years. Of course, when we had President Obama, that was a backstop, but I tell you, it makes a difference to be in the majority to help set the agenda. I am a very proud Democrat and truly believe in the Democratic Party and the Democratic values. I would be an honor to earn your support, not only in the primary, but we have to do everything we can to help every Democrat win in November, because there is so much at stake. And it is our freedom, our liberty, and our democracy. So thank you for all you do. I will continue to be a champion for public education, for bold climate action, for helping those who are less vulnerable, helping those who are vulnerable in our community, who are less able to have some opportunities. And leveling the playing field is something that's really important to me, and I will continue to do that work. My mother was an activist and a marched for civil rights, and I get my values from her. So I am in the fight with you, and again, appreciate the opportunity to be with you this evening. Let's go out there and win and have a big victory on Tuesday, but a huge victory in November for those midterms. I know with Congress, we're swimming upstream because the party in the White House typically loses seats in the midterms. Let's prove them wrong. Let's save our democracy. So thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, and thanks again for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Honestly, I wish we had more
pleasure.
time. I'm sure we would. I think we do have another question that came up in the chat, but that we can't get to.
Well, I'm happy to come back another time.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thanks, everybody. And I'm sorry I can't stay with you because I have another meeting and then a bill on the floor in the morning. And then
we understand. Thank you so much for joining us.
Everybody. Take care. Thanks for all you do. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Can somebody give me co-host responsibilities again, please? I'm struggling with that and it's annoying me at this point. So whoever, I don't know how that got out of my control, but that's a little frustrating. And then can somebody lower Bill Harris's hand? Also, folks, if you don't mind, please make sure your questions go in the chat. The reason we do that is to try to keep the conversation a little bit more limited because we have so many candidates, a short period of time, and we do have an official business meeting at 7:30 that we have to start on time. We're going to go to our next candidate, Darcy Long. I'm sure you look like you're ready to go. What I'll do, unfortunately, I'm just going to have to let you know you're at 2 minutes. I'll just kind of holler unless I get the timer back. So the floor is yours. Thank you so much, Darcy Long, candidate, House District 52.
Thank you very much. So my name is Darcy Long. I am from the Dalles. I am currently on the Dalles City Council, and I'm running for House District 52, which is currently represented by Representative Anna Williams out of Hood River. After redistricting, the Dalles and Mosier came into the district, so it's slightly different. But at this point, I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then you can ask me questions if you do about redistricting or any of my positions. So I was, my parents lived in Hood River when I was born, and they moved to the Dalles when I was about 6 months old. And I was raised there. I went through public school there. Then I went to college at Willamette University, and while I was there, I studied international studies and political science, and I spent a semester abroad in Japan. Then when I came back, my husband and I got married, and I've recently divorced, but we were married for 27 years, and we moved to Washington, D.C. and spent 2 years there. And the idea was that I knew at the time that I was going to be running for office as a representative from Oregon. I didn't know exactly what that would look like, but I wanted to get as much experience as possible. So while I was there, I spent a little bit of time in a law firm that actually was a lobbying firm, but I worked in their division that was for small business development. And then I became a professional temp, and I worked a whole bunch of really interesting places, like an HMO, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and a couple of different legal offices. When we came back to Oregon, so that my husband could become a sheriff's deputy, we settled in McMinnville, Oregon, and that's where both of our children were born. And we moved out to the small town of Yamhill, about 240 people at the time that we lived there. And we were there for a couple of years. But we found that my oldest son, who had autism, we found that it was very difficult to be so far away from family, even though we had access to supports in Portland. And so we moved back to the Dells, where we had extended family on both sides, since my husband and I were both from there. And my children are grown now. In fact, next week, one of them turns 25, and the week after that, one turns 22. And so um, I've been in the Dalles since then, since 2007, and he's giving me a little wave. Um, so anyway, I will let you ask your questions.
All right, Brent, do we have questions?
We don't, so I'd encourage people to put those in the chat if they've got them. But I will start off. Darcy, every candidate, has a list of their top priorities. So I'm just curious to hear what's at the top of your list.
Yes, so my top three priorities, and really in no particular order, they're just the things that I have the most personal experience with and I feel the most passionate about. And of course, it's very hard to limit, but my top three would be affordable, like workforce housing, the homelessness issue, and access to both physical and mental health care in our rural areas. We currently have quite a lack of access, as you know, and with Roe v. Wade occurring, that's of course going to be even more important out in our district. Um, if some of you might know, it made the national news, but this past fall, I put together a homeless shelter, actually two falls ago, when COVID started, and I put that together on my own and ran it. I actually lived down there for 5.5 months because we didn't have funding for salary. So I tend to put my money where my mouth is.
Thank you for sharing that. I'd actually love to hear more about that experience at that shelter. If you lived there for 5.5 months, what did you learn there being on the front lines that you feel like it would be important for you to share with the rest of us?
Well, I think one of the things that I would share is that those type of ventures are most successful when the person running them treats the people who are homeless and staying there as if they are what they are, human beings with feelings and needing of compassion. What I have seen on numerous occasions is that other people come in with a different attitude toward the homeless, sort of like they're doing them a big favor. And then I see a backlash from the homeless people because they feel disrespected. And I think that I had really good luck. I didn't have any police calls down to where I had the shelter. Everybody followed the rules, or there were consequences when they didn't, but we didn't have any major issues. And then when it got taken over and they started laying down all these rules and saying you can't come in or go out at this time and you have to let us search your stuff and all of that, people they just started having more and more problems down there. So I think that's my number one takeaway, is that we just need to treat homeless people like what they are, people who need to be respected. And we need to remember that some of them even have advanced degrees. And so you never know what caused someone to become homeless, or what their story was before, or what their potential for getting out of that situation is.
Great, thank you. Martin has a question about private for-profit companies taking kids out of public school districts. Do you have a point of view on this issue?
Yeah, that is a lot like a voucher system in a way. It hurts our school districts. We can barely fund things in the rural counties. It's hard enough to serve the students with the same opportunities that they have in the urban districts as far as classes go. And I'm really not in favor of that as an option, although I will say that on occasion we do need another option, especially for children with special needs. And there is no public option right now currently offering a effectively online education if they're not part of what's going on with the pandemic. And so, like in the Dalles, for example, we only have one school district. Same thing in Hood River. So we do need options when that's not working out for children, because we need to do what's best for the kids.
Thank you.
Marcia has a question. Obviously, you listed a few things in terms of your priorities, but are there any other issues that you're hearing from constituents in HD 52 that you haven't mentioned so far? Things that are top of mind for them?
Yeah, so I had a really interesting conversation the other day when I was making my calls with a gentleman out in, I believe, Welch's, talking about some clear cutting that had happened and some environmental damage that was going on, and saying that he really felt like Clackamas County was not paying attention to them and was not responsive at all to that. And so I'm looking forward to speaking with people in Multnomah County as well and finding out, I'm sure the issues are similar out there. And so I would definitely want to be able um, to find out what's going on sorry, I saw something in the chat distracted me. Um, I definitely want to know more about the issues, but I am actually endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters, and the environment is very important to me, both climate change and also just how we're treating the environment.
Julio, I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious how you plan on, as far as messaging, are you messaging to any of the right-wing rural voter? How do you feel about communicating with right-wing rural voters? Do you feel comfortable with the atmosphere that you feel in HD 52? Because I'm actually in HD 52. I'm in East County, and I was in inner Southeast Portland, and for about 10 years, moved out to East County, and there's definitely a difference. And you can feel it, you can hear it, you can see it in the signs. When you walk into a restaurant or a bar, the communication, the conversation's a little different. But I don't think that some of those folks are not unreachable. And I'm just curious if any of your messaging attention is focusing on that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would say that my personal friends and family list, when I wrote it out, was about evenly split, about a third Democrats, a third independent or non-affiliated, and a third Republican. And so we do have a Republicans for Darcy Long going. And I have, living here, I have really great communication skills. Of course, I'm not going to win everybody over, because some people are single issue or they're just very far to the right. But I have a lot of moderate friends, and I think we just use different language, and so it's all about listening to hear and not listening for your turn to speak. And I did run for House District 59, which is what the Dalles was in before the redistricting. And believe me, that is really red. That is where I said, "Hey, let's grab coffee, like at Starbucks or something," and they said, "Starbucks, Planned Parenthood," So I mean, just definitely some of that here, but not as much. And we are actually focusing on get out the vote, because in the last race, Anna, even being an incumbent, she only beat Jeff Helfrich by about 80 votes. And I understand, the lines are a little bit different. It's good that we pulled in the Dalles and Mosier, a little more blue, but we are expecting this to be a highly targeted race by the Republicans, and we are expecting it to be a very high dollar race. In fact, I was just on with the House leadership team about an hour before this meeting, talking about what we needed to do to make that happen. And so my campaign is not only going to need a lot of cash, we're also going to need a lot of volunteers, people that'll phone bank, people that'll help us knock doors. Just there's all kinds of things that people can do, and we definitely need to pop those signs up. So those of you that either know somebody out in East County where I can put my signs or can take one, that would be extremely helpful. And then also, if you can get me in touch, like a warm handoff to elected officials and people who maybe aren't so obvious to me because they're not elected, but who are very important in that part of the county, so that I can be having ongoing conversations with them.
All right, thank you. Any more questions that I didn't see, Burton?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, you want to just take another minute or two to wrap things up, Darcy?
Oh, sure. I thought maybe I was out of time. So, yeah, so I think at this point you kind of know what my issues are, but I think I'll just say that my campaign manager tells me that I'm different than any other politician she's ever worked for, and I love that. I treat her as an equal, and um, I do that with my constituents as well. I try to respect people. The whole reason I'm here is to help people. Originally, when I was in high school, I wanted to go into medicine to help people. And then I went to this thing called Girl State, where the young ladies get together and they make a state of Oregon, all the way from governor down to city councilors. And that was the first time I ever really heard anything at all about politics. My parents were not at all involved with that, and I got the political bug. So ever since then, I've just been building my skills and looking for an opportunity to serve. And I've enjoyed serving on the Dallas City Council, and now I look forward to serving even more people by serving House District 52. I think that regardless of who the Republican nominee is, I am the best candidate, the most skilled. But aside from that, um, I would say that knowing who my candidate is going to be, he is just not a very nice person, and he is definitely anti-abortion and has a lot of positions that we as progressive people do not approve of. So I look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. I so much appreciate that. Did you put your information in the chat so folks can reach out?
I will.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you, Darcy Long, candidate for House District 52, for joining us. Britton, unless I'm mistaken, I do not see Kaliko, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correct.
I have not heard.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move on. Mayor Gamba, Mark Gamba. So I think he joined us a little bit late. We're trying to do about 12 to 15 minutes per candidate, 2-minute kind of intro, some question and answer, and then another minute or two to wrap up. And I'll just have to like blurt out at you because we lost our timer. So if you're okay, if you're ready to go, the floor is yours.
No worries. And thank you. Thank you, Multnomah County. It's good to see all your smiling faces. Over my last 12 years of public service for the city of Milwaukee, I've led the city through a remarkable transformation. The downtown is thriving. The housing supply has increased dramatically. Safe routes to school are coming online every year. We have a new sustainable library, and parks are being built out. The vision for the city that I helped craft with our community to be a flourishing city that is entirely equitable, delightfully livable, and completely sustainable is coming true. We are also on a glide path of providing more affordable housing per capita than any other city in Clackamas County. It's important that our state rep be someone who has been in the thick of it, working at the local, county, metro, and even state level on the critical issues of our time, such as stopping climate chaos, providing affordable housing and services for those less fortunate, creating a transportation system for the 21st century, and addressing the racial injustices that have plagued our country for centuries. As we find ourselves in a lull from the brutal pandemic, it's important to recognize that we need a healthcare system that assures everyone access to high-quality healthcare so that we can reduce costs and benefit small businesses. The pandemic also made it very clear the vulnerability of many of our neighbors and businesses. We need a shift away from the economic system that concentrates all the wealth with the 1% and leaves 50% of the population one minor disaster away from homelessness. Lastly, we will need to respond to the likely and atrocious Supreme Court decision in a way that best helps those from other states. States that instead of protecting a woman's right to decide what is best for their lives and their health, like Oregon does, will be attacking them. We have much to do, and I appreciate any help that you can offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Great to see you. Britton, do we have any questions in the chat that popped up? And I don't.
No, but I've got some.
I do too. Go first.
Mayor Gamba, I'm curious to know sort of what lessons you've learned as mayor and which ones you think you're going to carry forward with you at the state level if you're elected.
Sure. I think one of the most important things to be able to do is kind of a soft skill, and that's to work to form coalitions, to work with other people that may not always agree with you on everything, but to find common ground on certain things so that you can get bills across the line. It doesn't do us any good to have, wonderful progressive bills if we can't get them passed. So, and that's not just Republicans we're talking about. Very often, there are Democrats that for whatever reason don't agree with the solutions that we might think are the right solutions. And creating those relationships and finding ways that the solution benefits them and their constituents as well as the rest of the state is really important.
Thank you. Julio.
I just wonder, what is it about you that makes you want to participate in politics? Because it's not an easy world to be involved in. What is it that keeps your drive, keeps you going, keeps you motivated?
Thanks. That's a great question. And there are days I wonder that myself. No, honestly, I mean, I was a National Geographic photographer for years, and I was seeing climate change occurring firsthand decades before it was predicted to, certain markers. And I'm very clear on how that plays out for the human race and, frankly, the rest of the species we share this planet with, if we continue with business as usual. So that is literally the thing that gets me up in the morning is stopping climate chaos. And that's what I've put a ton of work in at the Milwaukee level and regionally as well. And will be my number one focus down in Salem.
Thank you. That's good to hear. I'm looking at what's happening right now in California with the wildfires, what we've experienced last year. I mean, it's not only about time that we deal with this, but that we also find ways to shift a little bit, like, with what happened in Southern Oregon. I mean, it was just terrible this last year. And I worry that it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for us. And not only us, but California, possibly Washington, New Mexico's going crazy with wildfires. And, we think, oh, that's so far away, but that kind of stuff actually gets into the atmosphere and starts making its way into the Portland area and affects our air quality. So these things, yeah, I totally get it. Oh, I think we do have a question. Is that a question, Britton?
I know we have a question from Gary, which is, how can we get the legislature to more seriously engage in meaningful campaign finance reform? Curious if you have a point of view on that.
That's a great question. That would be a wonderful thing to make happen. It's interesting given that the voters passed that and then, we had a supermajority in both houses, and somehow, strangely, we still managed not to have that happen. So we can't blame the Republicans for that one. It's, I get it. I get how hard it is to raise money, $27 at a time. I've now been through 2 big campaigns, and I try really hard. In my congressional campaign, I took no corporate money. On this campaign, I'm easing off of that a little bit. I will take money from the solar industry or somebody else that I'm allied with. But I understand how much money has to be raised to win elections, and I understand how hard it is to do that in small denominations. But until we do that, we are going to continue to have a system of governance that benefits the wealthy, period. It always will. There's no way around that. So we will have to have those conversations. I believe I had that conversation with the speaker the other day, and I think he's very aligned with me as well. And I think with this new freshman class, it will be nearly 50% of the legislature this year. I think we got a shot, particularly since the speaker this has been one of his top issues for as long as I've known him.
Great. Okay, thank you for that. I know Bill Harris has his hand raised. You want to ask your
Hey,
question,
Bill.
Bill?
Do you think you will be able to be part of the many legislators necessary to refer to the voters a change in the constitutional quorum requirement for the legislature?
I would love to do that. We may not have to do that. I mean, we can give it a shot, but if you all are not aware, there is a ballot measure being they're gathering signatures for right now. My campaign has actually been doing that in addition to campaigning for my race and for Jamie McLeod Skinner and a couple others. But we've been helping gather signatures, and what that ballot measure would do is any legislator that has 10 or more unexcused absences, and it's not hard to get an excused absence, it really isn't. But if you have 10 or more unexcused absences, you would not be able to run again in the next election. That may be enough if we get that one across the line. And it polls well. They call it keep politicians accountable, and who doesn't want to do that, right? So I think we have a good shot this fall at getting that passed, and let's see if that can solve the problem. I think the quorum question, I would love to put it on the ballot. I just would be a little bit afraid that it wouldn't pass, because when you start getting into really technical questions, it's very easy to confuse the voters with big money campaigns, and I can guarantee you that Timber Unity and company will spend a fortune stopping that.
Great. All right, I think we've got time for maybe one more question. I see Sally has a question about criminal justice. She says that several very good criminal justice bills did not make it to the floor in the short session, and she's wondering if there are any criminal justice improvements that you would be interested in making if you became, the HD 41 rep.
Well, there's a lot. Some of them are technical little questions. Others are sort of bigger societal questions, and something that was one of the bills that didn't make it to the floor last time was decriminalizing prostitution. I think that has been used much like the war on drugs to put people of color in jail. It's so I know that dabbles in an area of morality that people sometimes aren't comfortable with, but I believe it's a societal ill that we criminalize, or that the people who are sex workers are criminalized. I think that's one that we could potentially get across the line. I've talked to a couple of other legislators that feel the same. Rob, I think, carried that the last time.
Thank you. Julio?
Okay, no more questions. I don't have any more. It's great to see you, Mark. Thank you so much for coming over and saying hello virtually. If you want to take a minute or two to just give us a quick wrap up and make sure your information's in the chat so we can anybody can find you.
You bet. Thank you so much, and thank you again, all of you, for having me. I want to reiterate. We saw what the ice storm did, people without electricity for 10 days. We saw the worst, we all experienced the worst air quality in the world there for a couple of weeks during the fires, the heat dome that killed people. Those are just a taste of what's coming. They are just a taste. We have 8 years to stop the worst effects of climate chaos. We need to hit the ground running this session. We need to be passing major climate legislation. We need legislators in the House that are going to concentrate on that are passionate about that will not take no for an answer on that issue. And we don't have time for people to get up to speed. We need to hit the ground running. So it's really why I chose to step into this race when Karen stepped down. She was one of our climate champions, and now we're out, one of our climate champions, right? there just aren't enough of them in the House. So that's why I'm running, and that's why, to me, this is such an important race. And I appreciate, again, all of your time and your help.
Yes, thank you for joining us, Mayor Mark Gamba. Great to see you again. And of course, we would always love to have you back as well as a leader, a Democratic leader in our area. It'd be fantastic to hear more from you. And sorry we don't have more time for our candidates. Unfortunately, we've got quite a few.
Be happy to do it
Okay.
anytime.
Thanks. I'll see you later. Okay. Britton, we're going to get ready to move on to our next candidate, Raz Mason, for Senate District 26, which is also my home district, and a very unique district because it goes from the Dalles all the way to Canby. So it's definitely a challenge. Raz, are you ready to get going?
I very much am ready to get going. And
All
I'd like
right.
to give a shout out of deep appreciation to Mayor Gamba for his lead-in. I'm taking it as a lead-in because climate change is something that I am so incredibly passionate about. Julio, you also shared some very important information about this district. I describe it as the Mount Hood district, so people have that sense. It covers some of our most beautiful places in the state and some that are most vulnerable to our climate extremes, like the wildfires, drought issues, challenges to very, very important agricultural areas. Now, the wheat areas are not so much in the district, but they're certainly adjacent. However, a lot of the stone crops are. The cherries, the pears, the tree fruits. So I'm going to just kind of center myself because what I would usually start off saying has been said. This is a big district. It's a rural district. And I think in many ways, I'm very grateful to be where I am at this moment because my background has prepared me, I think, to have something important to say to the diversity of this district. I'm a former executive director of a climate change education foundation, and that work grew particularly from my work as a secondary science educator. I worked in career technical education for a number of years, also have taught social studies, including economics and government, particularly relevant, I think, to be a legislator, and English language arts. So how we tell stories, how we engage people, and the narratives that drive their beliefs is incredibly important. My background goes all the way over to long-haul truck driving. So connecting with our rural people is, rural working people, I mean, those are my people. I had the happiest years of my childhood in Eastern Oregon, which drove me back since 2014 to live in the Dalles. I've been an interfaith chaplain working especially with veterans. I have a public security aspect to my experience that I think is important for helping me understand and connect with our rural folks as well. And then underlying a lot of this is one of the first experiences I had out of high school, which was to work in the domestic abuse field for a number of years. So I look at things from a trauma-informed lens, and I look at how people are reacting to so many systemic, economic, social injustices. And as many of you likely know, we have one of the highest rates of addiction in the country, and we have one of the lowest amounts of funding for mental health care. So coming from a trauma-informed lens, that lens of compassion, respecting people's dignity, as Darcy so eloquently said, these are some really fundamental things that inform me as I think about communicating around issues like economic justice, affordable housing, healthcare access, transitioning to an innovation-driven, inclusive, green climate response, and so many other issues. So I'll pause now for that.
Thank you, Roz. Britton, do we have some questions?
My first question is, I just want to make sure I pronounce your first name correctly.
It is Raz. It is spelled deceptively. Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Raz, there seems to be a lot of hand wringing in the Democratic Party about rural voters and how to
Mhm.
connect with them. So I'm just curious what advice, what learnings can you share with us? What's the secret?
Okay, well, I'm really excited you asked, and you may need to, wave hands or something to get me off this topic. I think one place to start is that living rural is a choice. And I've made a point over the last several years in particular, but going back much further, to spend time with a variety of folks who would be center right. And one of those groups is Oregon Women for Agriculture. And they're emblematic of how passionate people are about claiming land stewardship when they're on the right. So I think that there are some of the shared values, but we need to be very careful about listening and honoring people's engagement while being also open to offer resources to pivot. So things like moving towards sustainable agriculture is something I'm extremely concerned and hopeful about. And yet I also want to honor the lived experience of our ag producers who do what they do because they care about the land. So again, it's about making room for people. And I am a candidate of both and. So a lot of the incivility we see, this idea of urban and suburban is over here, rural is over there, it comes out of this dualistic mindset that as humans, we just fall into when we're under stress. So it's very understandable. I have a great deal of passion for it, and we can do better. And so it's really for me about adding yes and. So adding context, adding complexity to reality, which is not amenable to simple solutions. Especially around inclusivity, diversity. There's so much fear that's been stoked around Black Lives Matter, around immigration. Of course, many people on the right are getting a paycheck from this. It's helping drive their fundraising for campaigning. My focus is very much on neighbor and welcoming neighbors. I can speak from my own experience of how my life has been incredibly enriched by the diverse people that I've had the opportunity to know personally and work alongside. So to me, the richness of our diversity is something to celebrate. And again, what I see in the divisiveness in our country is really people who are afraid. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it just is folks who live in some rural areas, not so much mine, where we have a wonderful, large Latinx population. But a lot of folks don't necessarily have those personal relationships that let them see that this is something to fight for, because when you don't, you're hurting someone I love. So I talk about relationship privilege. I've had that opportunity to get to know folks who inspire me to champion inclusivity. I mentioned truck driving. I'm going to pivot a few times here in this answer. I mentioned the truck driving piece. Our country has not yet adequately wrestled with classism. And there's a flavor of classism, I would suggest, that we could call ruralism. I've seen it as a teacher going to the representative assembly for the teachers union. It's easy to just assume, those folks in those small towns, they don't know what's going on. They don't really have anything to contribute. So the more we're in dialogue, the more we're genuinely listening to one another. Again, a very important theme we've already heard tonight. That's going to help us gain ground, because people do know when someone cares and they're being listened to. And I guess I'm going to pause there, although having said that, I'm going to add one more piece. And that is around public safety. That is one of the issues that I didn't mention in my introduction. Right now, I happen to be a part-time security officer, which I chose to move into because I wanted more think time after having been a teacher. I wanted to do more reading and writing about sociopolitical issues, and then this race occurred, one of two possible flips in the state. So like Darcy's, a very, very important race. I'm a gun owner, and east of the mountains especially, we spend a lot of time talking about responsible gun ownership. It is a part of people's recreation, especially around hunting, target shooting, going to the gun store and hanging out. I have a lot of ambivalence about that because I mentioned my background in domestic abuse. And I know how often weapons and a really strict vision of what strength looks like can be turned into a power over model that's very damaging. And this power with is really what I want to encourage and help blossom.
Hey,
But,
Raz, we
yeah.
do have a question for you that popped into the chat.
Okay.
It's from Deanne Salazar. What policies do you suggest to help rule voters and to reach past the propaganda and the box they're tempted to put you in?
Great. Well, it actually ties into the public safety piece. My presumed opponent is an extremely well-funded Trumpist. Darcy's already run against him. The fact that he's a Trump voter, if we can get that word out, I think means that I can win the Democrats to the independents over to some of the moderate Republicans. And there can be care taken around how we speak about police funding. I am very, very committed to Black Lives Matter. I've gotten in trouble actually in my community by talking about that as a teacher. And I think because I'm the former secretary of a police chaplain section of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and I work in security, I am somewhat immune to the rabble rousing that my opponent is already doing in his TV ads. I mentioned well-funded, where he's talking about, we're not going to defund the police, to which I say, I'm not going to defund the police either. And I have a video that we're final editing around the need for mental health teams that can respond to 911 calls more effectively, teams that respond to addiction crises. And there's another piece there that's slightly different, but extremely important, and that is around the nervous system regulation of our police officers who respond to crises. The city of San Francisco's crisis team has had a 99.9% nonviolent response rate after being trained in nervous system informed de-escalation techniques. I had the privilege of being trained in this through the Mind Fitness Training Institute, which was doing the most cutting edge work around nervous system and trauma. And so this is something where I think we can build bridges. I'm going to say we are rural folks who want our police to be safe. We also want the police, when they're called out, to be able to respond very appropriately to the situations in which they find themselves.
All right. Thank you, Raz. We're at 12 minutes. You want to take a minute or two just to wrap up, close up, and make sure your info is in the chat.
Yes, and thank you, Britton, for reposting that.
Sure.
I mentioned that I'm an educator, and so I look at this very much as an educator. As teachers, we try to offer our children and our students shame-free classrooms because we know that learning happens gradually. And for people to learn, there has to be safety to try things out and realize, wait a minute, that's not actually what I think. Let me try it this way. And that spirit informs my interaction with voters, and it's part of what I want to message in terms of really inviting people to deepen their relationship with government. I do hear from voters a lot of antipathy and concern about government having too much control, legislators not really understanding the issues. And so it excites me to bring people along and help them realize, this is what the government is doing that's already helped your life. Here are things we can do that are going to make significant improvements in the things you value. So it's that dignity, it's letting everybody be a learner, and offering hope, because what I see that really is troubling to so many of us, like I said, I believe that arises out of fear. And when we offer people hope, encouragement, and respect, I think we can change the narrative in the ways we need to.
Awesome. Thank you, Raz. And I'm so glad that we have a candidate for Senate District 26. It was something I was quite nervous about. So I appreciate you standing up and making this a go. We've got one more candidate here live, and then we've got Hoa Nguyen's video. Candidate for Governor, George Carrillo. Thank you for joining us. Happy to see you again. The floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is George Carrillo, and I am so happy to be here with all of you. So a little bit about me for those of you that don't know who I am. You know, I was previously a United States Marine, and now I'm a disabled veteran. I was also a sheriff deputy, and I know how to implement the law to maintain the appropriate balance of the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. I'm currently a senior executive at the Oregon Health Authority, where I manage a diverse staff and hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, throughout this election, we continue to hear how important this election is and how we must elect a candidate who can win. You know, my sad reality of our time is that a person of color, we're often overlooked as someone who can win. As a first Latino candidate for the Democratic Party in the history of this state, I know firsthand how the media only wants to send a message that only two politicians have any credibility. That system of oppression only fuels our own bias as we try to fit into a culture of dominance. As many of the candidates have paraded their accomplishments, our communities continue to be the recipients of their failed understanding of the proper implementation of equity, diversity, and inclusion. You know, when they say they'll never leave people behind, they can never comprehend what it means to sacrifice everything in order to protect others. As they tout the laws that they've passed for providing us human rights, I refuse to say thank you for something that was always ours. You know, I plan to address the needs of Oregonians by implementing my government reform package because we can no longer afford to have people leading our agencies who do not meet the minimum requirements of implementing equitable practices. As governor, I will appoint the first director of tribal affairs to the governor's office. The director and staff will work on giving tribes control of their land. The tribes will have control over their ecosystem, their fish, wildlife, and game. We will fix our housing problem with a coordinated approach that promotes transitional services and builds supported housing throughout a collaborative approach and opportunities for small businesses to grow. We'll stop our school to prison pipeline by setting up our schools as social service centers to offer a more equitable education. I will no longer allow our children to fail before they get help. Our children will receive testing when they enter public school, and we will build an equitable plan for students and teachers. We will reform our criminal justice system to provide the proper balance of the law and not to continue to marginalize low-income communities. We will take care of our community by providing healthcare for all, and we will be prepared for the next pandemic and other natural disasters. As a government, we will flip the switch on clean energy, and we will lead by example. We will create job growth in rural Oregon to mass produce clean energy parts and to drive the cost of goods down to be more affordable. You know, as brother Dr. Wajid Saeed has told me, it's now time to heal our nation. As governor, we will make the space for us to heal and for us to come together. And we have to be able to make these necessary changes. That is the reason why I'm running for governor, and that is the reason why I'm asking you to vote for me.
Thank you, George Carrillo. Appreciate you showing up and coming out and joining us. This is, I think, the first time you've been with the Multnomah County Democrats for anything. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah. So I'm really curious, like what, like at night when you're sitting there in your bed and you're like wondering about what's going to happen, like how do you see your future in Oregon politics? Not only as governor possibly, but beyond that, because, you know, governors do serve a term. How do you see the long haul about what you can do in Oregon, again, for as long as we live here?
Yeah, you know, this call to serve has always been there for me. I've always have served, whether it's my country or my community. I've always been an active member to participate, to be an interrupter of the things that are wrong in our society today. So if I win as governor, you know what? It's going to be a huge overhaul into the executive branch, which I currently work in, to change these systems of oppression, these inequities, this marginalization that we see in our government. And I think, you know, after that, I tell people, look, my strategy is to win this election. I'm not worried about 4 years from now. My strategy to get reelected is if I've earned that through actually being an effective governor, then let the people decide my fate. But after that, I will continue to work. I think I'm just a little bit too young. You know, I'm almost 44. I'm like, I think I would be a little bit too young to retire at the age of 48 after being governor. But I will continue to work. I'll continue to still do the work of the people. You know, the unfortunate realities of my experience has been that I have seen the worst in humanity in every way possible. And it's something that I don't talk about for a reason, because there's nothing nice to say. But I take all of that and I use it as the passion and the words that you hear come out of my mouth to be able to make this world just a better place. And really, it's not even for me. I've already been hurt. I've already been damaged. It's really about being able to provide a better opportunity for our kids and for my children too.
Well, I appreciate that, and certainly appreciate your service not only as a Marine but as a sheriff. Both extremely challenging situations to find yourself, and both obviously at the service of others. So thank you so much for that. Britton, do we have any questions popping up in the chat?
I'll get to it. Looks like Dan has one. I do have a question first for you, George, though, which is
Sure.
the housing crisis. It's oftentimes truncated as just that, the housing crisis, but working at, the Oregon Housing Authority, I'm just curious to hear what you've learned in that role that you would sort of take with you as you would try to tackle that issue. Because as we all know, like health and particularly mental health is a key component of that. So I'm curious to hear your point of view on that front.
Yeah, when we think about housing, the housing problem that we have currently today is just not by the amount of people that we see houseless in downtown Portland. The harsh reality that so many Oregonians face right now is that there's literally hundreds of thousands of people right now that are about 1 to 2 paychecks away from being houseless. Right now, about 95% of Oregonians don't have more than $10,000 in the savings account. Yet the median price throughout Oregon is $509,000. Who can afford $100,000 right now? When we think about the marginalization that happens, and I always tell people, marginalization isn't always about the color of our skin. We leave people behind all over this state. So when we think about the wealth gap, the ability to purchase a home, the ability to be able to pass on that generational wealth, it just doesn't currently exist right now. It does exist for a few people, but not the many. And one of the things when you think about, okay, so George, what is your plan? What is the strategy, right? This is great data. The strategy is that we need to have transitional services. We don't have any right now. So even if we wanted to take everybody off the streets and say, we're going to put you in this building, we don't even have that building. We need to be honest with everybody. We're 40,000 homes behind. We need more supportive housing. It's going to take us about 10 years to build our way out of this. And that's at full capacity. So what do we do with the people that are houseless? I don't like to call them homeless because they all have a home. It's their definition of what a home is. But for being houseless, we need to be able to provide a transitional system that actually provides a livable condition that is humane. For instance, navigation centers. If some of you don't know what that is, it's a building. It's basically like a medical plaza. It's a one-stop shop. If you think about it in your current communities, think of it as your community center. And everything around the community center is sidewalks and grass and trees and housing. It's the same thing, just navigation centers are set up a little bit different. Each one has a different way of providing living, whether it's through tents, tiny homes, single family dwelling. There's all these different things, but the great thing when you think of the social determinants of health is that it's right there, all of the resources that they need, employment, dentist, behavioral health, just basic healthcare. It's all right there in that navigation center. But yet that community still has sidewalks. It still has plants and trees. It still allows the opportunity for someone to say, this is where I want to live and look where I live, instead of giving them a concrete slab, putting chain link fence around them and saying, this is where you're going to live because we don't want to see you anymore. So it's a multi-layered approach, but honestly, there needs to be that accountability. And when I talk about my other opponents, I don't like to throw dirt, but I will tell you, they both have been in office for 16 years and at the highest positions, and they like to tout the things that they have accomplished. But yet this system that we see today did not happen simply because of the pandemic. You don't get behind by 40,000 homes, and you don't have a lack of behavioral health system in this state simply because of a pandemic. It has taken years for us to fall this far in the hole.
Thank you for that. That's actually a good segue to a question from Dian Salazar, who is a fellow Latino. And he says he appreciates you. He's curious to know why you think you have not gained as much public attention compared to the other two very well-funded candidates.
Yeah, it's simple. It's the media. The media does not provide an opportunity. They keep saying the same narrative. I've had to claw my way all the way to the top. Understand that maybe you have not heard of me, some of you, but others have. I am one of the top 3 contenders. That's based off the Lund report. That's based off of me debating them on Coin 6. That is based off of being in the forum with the Urban League and yesterday with the Latinx Forum. I'm part of these conversations or part of these debates and putting myself all over the state. And I'm giving these longtime politicians a run for their money. But this is the corruption that we see. This is what is defined as institutional racism. To not be able to see my qualifications and to not give me an identity, even after I walk off the debate stage and I embarrass the both of them. That is a system of oppression. And that is a system that, for my white colleagues, for all of you who identify as Caucasian or white, that's not your fault, but that is the inheritance that you get from this dominant culture. So if we continue to support that there's only 2 legitimate candidates, you're inheriting what you're providing as a narrative. But hopefully today you see that there is an educated brown person that actually has real lived experience, and not just in passing the laws, and actually implementing them.
Awesome. Thank you. Julio.
Well, I have a question. I'm curious how the Hispanic community has received you, how you've been connecting with them, because where I grew up in South Texas, there was a lot of distrust of government in general, of banks in general. Yeah, I'm just kind of curious how the Hispanic community has come across, seeing that there's a candidate for governor that, like you said, has brown skin, that is a Hispanic. How have they received you? How are you reaching out to them? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting answer that I'm going to provide all of you, because it's been mixed. In the very beginning, I will tell you that I reached out to a lot of Latino leaders and organizations, and there was much resistance to me entering in this race because there's already deals that are made. Unfortunately, a lot of our small business organizations and community-based organizations that identify as Latinx or Latino, they don't want to lose the little that they have. And so, of course, they're going to endorse who they feel they need to endorse to be able to secure what they have, because it's about survival. But when it comes to the farm workers and the everyday person, it's a little different. They have really, when you talk about those tough days where you just don't want to do this anymore, they're the ones that lift you up. They're the ones that continue to push me to move forward. And, I think one of the most difficult visits that I had was going to Phoenix, Oregon, to see the devastations of the wildfire that's still, that area is still not up to par. And I had a mother there talking to me about how the Latino community has been affected there. Something that we don't talk about in the media is that down there, children, the Latino children down there, 40% of them are homeless from the wildfires still today. She grabbed my arm and said to me, I want you to win because I want you to take care of my kids, because I'm undocumented and I know there's nothing you can do for me, but please just take care of my children. you want to talk about an impact. I carry that with me every day when things get tough. But now, all of a sudden, things have changed. People have seen me more. The Latino population, what they thought wasn't possible, and I'm talking about our elected Latino leaders and some of our community-based organizations, they never thought it was possible that I could reach this level. And no matter what, I've made history here today during this election cycle. I'm the first person of color to ever reach that debate stage for the Democratic Party to be one of the top contenders to be the next governor. That is something that not is what I did, is that the community around me pushed and pushed and pushed to make that a reality. So now today, a lot of those leaders and a lot of the community-based organizations and some of the naysayers, they have switched to an apology, and they've switched to show support. And, honestly, I tell them, there's nothing to apologize about. It's a system of oppression that we just feel that we can never do. The things that, if that ceiling's never been broken, why would we ever think that we could today? It's just a lesson that we all have to learn as people of color.
Well, Candidate Carrillo, thank you so much for sharing your stories and connecting with us. Do you want to take a quick minute or two to wrap up? And then we've got to get to our video from Hoa Nguyen, and then we've got to go into our business meeting.
Yes. I want to thank everybody in closing, for this opportunity. And I know that some of the words that I say are extremely difficult sometimes to comprehend and to even swallow. But I want everyone to understand that there's a reason, for this passion that I have. Because, I shared a little bit about the little bit of trauma that I've had in my life, and I say a little bit sarcastically. And that level of trauma is that every single night when I close my eyes, I see the people that I couldn't save. I owe a debt of gratitude to them because they're the ones that made me who I am today. Through their suffering, I learned to be strong enough to be able to withstand the change. I've seen too many of my fellow Marines that they never came home because their mind has trapped them in that fog of war. I've held mothers that have died in my arms as they overdose, or a senior woman who committed suicide because she didn't want to pass on her debt to her children. I've seen that evil in a man's eyes when I interviewed him, and blaming a child that they were so seductive that that's the reason that they had to sexually assault them. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I truly have seen the worst in humanity. When I think about people of color in the state, I want all of us to have better rights and protections than a dog in Oregon. If you abandon a dog in Oregon, it's a criminal misdemeanor. Yet somehow it's okay to leave a 9-year-old child working in the fields on a hot summer day without any legal repercussion. That is the reality that we live in today. I want all of us, regardless of the outcome of this election, to understand that we don't work for politicians. Politicians, they work for us. But in this dominant culture, I want our leaders to be able to understand that they could never understand what it means to be a person of color or a person who's been marginalized. I'm running for change because I want us to be able to walk into a room where we're not asked to be something we're not. As governor, I want to provide us with opportunities to reach the highest levels of our government. I don't want to tokenize positions as a check mark. I promise, though, when I win and become governor, that I will hire a diversified staff that represents the state of Oregon and that has the ability to implement the necessary changes. When the dominant culture or the Republican Party pushes back, I promise you that I will stand right beside them and I will consistently remind them how powerful we are.
Thank you, candidate Carrillo, for joining us, and thank you for all your message and everything you bring. Honestly, just as a candidate, especially for me personally, as a person of color, I think it's fantastic that you're in this race and certainly have stepped up to the plate in such a fantastic way. And I apologize again. We would love to have you back at some point as a leader, but unfortunately, we do have to get to our business meeting. So thank you for joining us, and we're going to move on to Hoa Nguyen's video. And of course, folks. Oh, Britton, thank you so much. You're prepared.
Yep. Let's see if this works.
I can't hear it.
Can't hear it. Let's try again.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Hoa Nguyen, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently the candidate running for state representative in House District 48. My apologies, I couldn't be here in participation this evening. I currently serve on the David Douglas School Board, and we have a meeting at the same exact time. House District 48 is a newly redrawn district, and it includes parts of East Portland and parts of North Clackamas County, and is currently represented by retiring incumbent Jeff Rudin, in which I have his full support and endorsement for this campaign. My lived experiences as a second-generation Vietnamese American informs my current work and values with my community as a leader. I have a nearly 20-year career as an educator, professional in public schools, nonprofits, and community advocacy. In the last 8 years, my work as a school attendance coach in Portland Public School focuses on chronic absenteeism, which is linked to homelessness, poverty, housing, mental health, transportation, and public safety. We cannot improve public education if we do not improve the infrastructure that impacts the quality of life for students, families, and everyday working people. Last year, I won a competitive school board campaign and was elected to the David Douglas School Board as the first Vietnamese American board member. This decision to run for state representative came after much thought and consideration and support from my community. Some value priorities I'm committed to as your next state legislator is a strong public education. I have firsthand experience working in our schools, and I believe in the power of education, and we will protect and expand the resources needed for teachers and workforce development that is fairly compensated and culturally competent. I will also fight for innovative and emerging programs to address the disparities in our schools, for example, scaling up early childhood development, English learner, and youth empowerment programs. Another priority of mine is accessible transportation and climate justice. East Portland and North Clackamas are expected to continue growing significantly. From Damascus to Powhurst Gilbert, we will see population growth and more demand on our transportation infrastructure. And at the same time, climate change is real. And for our communities on the edge of urban growth boundary adjacent to some of Oregon's most incredible forests and green spaces, we are also at risk from extreme heat and devastating wildfires like we have experienced recently. I'm also committed to principles of multi-modal transportation options, where we give attention and resources to not only automobiles, but also to public transit, bicycle, and pedestrian infrastructure, modes that we know will reduce the destructive impacts of greenhouse gases and increase community livability. Every day in my personal and professional life, I have to fight for equity for myself and others. And when we center equity in policymaking, everyone benefits and our economy thrives. And that is why representation matters. When diverse leaders are at the table, we create a pipeline that encourages more diverse perspectives and community collaboration. And I do believe that an equitable, progressive, and representative community for all Oregonians is possible. Thank you so much. I encourage you to visit my website at www.winfororegon.com to learn more, to volunteer, to contribute to my campaign, and to learn more about my platform. Have a great evening, everyone.
Yay. Can I get everybody to unmute and just give a big round of applause for all of our wonderful candidates? Yeah. Good job, Beth. Beth was rocking it. Again, my apologies. My apologies. I don't have good lighting. I'm out of town, so I don't have my lighting set up. So that's why I look so dark. It is officially meeting time for the Multnomah County Democrats. So we do have an official meeting. So for those of you who are guests and don't want to participate or hang out for the meeting, because sometimes it gets a little bit boring. But tonight, I think it's actually a really great night. If you want to stick around, we have quite a few things happening that I think are really important. But of course, I will call this meeting to order at this time. I want to make sure that my admin team is with me because I have not seen everybody. Patch, are you here?
Present, sir.
Thank you. Marcia's here.